y'all know I had to rep the colors of today's team. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the 2024 offseason of your Miami Dolphins. Before we get into today's video, guys, I just want to give a special shout out to today's sponsors, starting with Gold Fine and Bowles, lawyers for the injured. Personal injury, workers' compensation, those are their two things, but any sort of legal advice, they're the people to call. Give them a phone call, 309-673-5144. Tell them we sent you, okay? And I'd also like to shout out SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video as well. Use promo code PLAYBOOKSPORTS on their website to get $20 off your first purchase of $30 or more. Let's get back to the video. All right, last year, let's get it out of the way. Another year where we started out hot. So much fun to watch. I mean, I was at the game where we put up 70 points in a single football game. An unbelievable display. Just so much fun to watch. Just lights out football on both sides. And then it started to get colder outside. And as it got colder outside, so too did the Miami Dolphins. And lost the last two regular season games of the season, of the year, to blow the division away to Buffalo, give the Buffalo Bills the stupid division, which was just sickening, and guaranteed us a matchup in Kansas City in negative 30-degree wind chill where people literally were hospitalized. And you lose to the eventual Super Bowl champs. Just a season that completely sputtered out towards the end, going up against good teams, right? In Baltimore, at home against Buffalo, and in Kansas City. That is a brutal three-run stretch. And if you have the mettle to win a Super Bowl, you win one, two, all three of those games, and we won none of them. So clearly it wasn't meant to be. Obviously, injuries, every team's injured. I don't even want to waste any time talking about the injuries we dealt with. Every team is banged up at that point in the season. You cannot use it as an excuse. So when you look at the Dolphins last season, you always saw a team where, and I hate to use what Chris Broussard said, but Dolphins didn't want to fight. They wanted to break dance because the Dolphins were great break dancers. They would dance a freaking circle around you. But if you put the Miami Dolphins in a phone booth and you tried to fight them, fist fight them, Dolphins were out. They were either just not in it or they were just going to get their ass kicked. It's just how it went. Every time we played a physical team, they out-physicaled us. And we didn't face that many physical teams. And yes, we just have vastly superior talent to maybe some teams who play physical football but just don't have the talent. So we had more talent than them, and we were able to boat race them and get ahead of them so that way their physical play style didn't affect us nearly as much. So, I mean, disappointing season, obviously. Dolphins have to continue to prove that this team, the way that this is built, can do the thing, can win a playoff game, can make a run in the AFC, in a tough AFC where you're going to play in cold weather against good physical football teams. Have they done it? Have they made the moves this offseason in order to get where we all want them to go? Let's talk about it. We start every video with coaching staff changes, and we are going to start with Miami and defensive coordinator Vic Fangio mutually parting ways here. Now, I'm still waiting, NFL, on our comp picks for the Eagles very clearly tampering and taking our defensive coordinator from us. There is simply no way, right? Think about it. There is literally no way that him and the Dolphins mutually agreed, yeah, we're going to part ways, and then less than 24 hours, he had a brand new contract already written, already signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. You cannot convince me that from the time he was let go from Miami to seek other job opportunities, he was contacted by the Eagles or reached out to the Eagles. A complete contract was written up and agreed upon by all parties and signed. There's simply no way. I know he wanted to be there, and he didn't want Miami. He wanted the Philly job last year, and he came to Miami because Philly kind of drug their feet on it for a while and ultimately didn't like what they got. So they're like, well, never mind, we want you back, Vic. And Vic's like, oh, right, perfect. I'll just mutually part ways with Miami because we could have said no. Miami could have very easily, you can do that. Look at the Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator. They did not let him leave. He wanted defensive coordinator positions in other franchises that aren't a dumpster fire like Carolina is. And they said, no, sorry, we're not letting you go. You're too valuable. And Fangio was like, I'm out. I'm leaving. I want the Philly job, and I just won't coach. I'll just retire. I don't know. That's hearsay. Maybe he didn't say that. I'm certain that he said something along the lines of, I don't want to coach for you guys. I want to coach in Philadelphia. That's where I always wanted to go anyways. And Philly's like, yeah, we've got a contract literally typed up waiting for you, so you just tell us when you're free. So I expect a comp pick in the next year or two, NFL, because you were real quick to take those away from teams like us, right? So you owe us one. However, I like Anthony Weaver, the defensive-minded guy that we brought in from Baltimore, assistant head coach there. Helped coach defensive line. He was also the defensive line coach last year. Justin Madubuike. Now, how much was it? Mike McDonald versus Anthony Weaver. Anthony Weaver was a defensive line coach. Justin Madubuike had a breakout season last year, and last year was Weaver's one of his first years coaching the defensive linemen. So that gives me kind of hope for him, especially on the defensive line side, and because we just lost some talent on the defensive line, which I will get to. So You hate to lose a coach like Vic Fangio, and with his reputation as one of the greatest defensive coordinators of all time, I give him respect for that, and I still think he's a fantastic coach. I'm not taking any of that away from him. But you listen to what the Dolphins players have said this offseason, and once Vic Fangio left, I mean, Cam Smith immediately tweets out a picture of an unlocked lock, like they finally unlocked me, let me play, because Fangio never played him. And Holland said, Javon Holland, who I love as a Dolphin, came out and said, they were like, what's the difference between a guy like Anthony Weaver and Vic Fangio? And he didn't mince his words. He said, well, one of the nice things about Anthony Weaver is that he's a nice guy. He's actually a nice guy. Fangio is an old school guy, a my way or the highway kind of guy. We're going to do it this way. That's the way I've done it for years. This way we're going to do it. I don't care what your strengths are as a player. We're doing it my way. If you complain, you're on the bench. Sorry. And that just doesn't work. It doesn't work as much in today's day and age with players. So I'm going to, in fairness to Vic Fangio's career, I'm going to call this a wash. Of defensive coordinator in versus defensive coordinator out. It clearly wasn't working necessarily well with Fangio last year anyways, so we'll call it a wash. However, my biased opinion is I'm happy bringing in a young guy who can work with the defensive players a little bit better. Fangio brought a great scheme with him, but how much coaching was he actually doing? I don't know of much. He sat in the booth every single game. I hate that. Get down on the sideline. Talk to your players. Anthony Weaver, I guarantee, will be on the sideline talking to his players. I like him going forward. Excited to see what he can do. Let's talk about players who have left Miami this offseason, and Dolphins fans, we knew this was coming, right? We've been knowing this was coming. You can't pay Tyreek Hill $30 million a year. You can't pay Bradley Chubb all that money. You pay Teron Armstead all that money. You extended Austin Jackson. You've got a quarterback to pay. You've got guys to pay. You've got Jalen Waddle, Javon Holland, and Jalen Phillips all coming up for extensions next year. Within the next year or two, you've got to extend them too. So we knew this was going to happen. So I was prepared. It still hurts. And I'm going to start with Christian Wilkins, a fan favorite, former first-round pick of the Miami Dolphins. It hurts when he goes, especially when he goes to the Las Vegas Raiders and he gets paid $27.5 million a year. There's no way Miami could match that number. Simply no way. The way the cap is, you could not pay him $27.5 no matter what. I would have been angry if we had given him that money and said, we'll figure it out. Because no, then you're going to lose so much more talent in the next few years paying a defensive tackle, a run-stopping defensive tackle who doesn't really rush the passer. I love Christian Wilkins. I've said it every time I've talked about him. Absolutely love the guy as a player. I would not have been comfortable paying him that much money at all. So, yep, it stinks to see him go, but I'm okay with it. They also lose starting offensive guard Robert Hunt to the Carolina Panthers. $20 million a year for Robert Hunt. Before he got paid, before Robert Hunt got $20 million a year, nobody even said his name as one of the top 5 right guards. Just right guard, not even guard in general. Top 5 right guards in football. No one said it. And then all of a sudden he gets $20 million a year, and everyone's like, oh, maybe he is a top 5 right guard in the NFL. I don't know. But when you watched him, you didn't think that. So that's interesting to me. Again, another player I would have been really upset if we tried to squeeze in $20 million a year to a right guard. I love Robert Hunt. He'll forever be a Dolphin fan favorite, even though he left. Forever a fan favorite, especially when he caught the pass that was not intended for him, juked out a defender, and extended the ball across the goal line in that game against the Ravens for a touchdown that didn't count because he's an ineligible receiver. He cannot catch the pass. But damn it if that wasn't the most exciting play of that terrible season with Brian Flores. So I'll miss him. Absolutely going to miss him. And we still have a big hole there, too. So got to fill that hole as well. Another fan favorite, Andrew Van Ginkel, walks to Minnesota. I want to say he got about, $10 million a year, 2 years, $20 million to go play with Brian Flores. Couldn't pay him. I love Andrew Van Ginkel. He's kind of a folk legend, at least in my family. We're all big Van Ginkel fans. I got my brother, who is not a Dolphins fan, a Van Ginkel jersey because we all like Andrew Van Ginkel. So sad to see him go, but he was a rotational defensive end. You don't pay guys that can't he can't change a game. I'm sorry. Van Ginkel cannot change a game. He's solid. A little undersized, but he's solid. I wouldn't pay him $10 million a year, which is what he got. So that's okay. Xavier Howard cut with a post-June 1st designation, so that money will be hitting the Dolphins' bankroll real soon here. Going to save about $18 million a year. That hopefully will be used well. Loved Xavier Howard. Appreciate everything he did in Miami. Would welcome him back on a lower-cost contract because he's not worth that much money anymore. He's just not. Get your money. I'm all for NFL players getting their money, but X was constantly getting beat these last 2 seasons. Could not be trusted to cover a number 1 receiver. Hardly could be trusted to cover a number 2. Great production for a long time. Huge Xavier Howard fan. Loved him in Miami. Appreciate him for sticking through the really crappy years, 2018, 2019, when we were just awful. He stuck it out, and I will always appreciate him for that. So sad to see him go, but it made a ton of sense. Dolphins also lost rotational safety Brandon Jones, who actually got paid pretty decently by Denver, which really shocked me. I mean, he couldn't even find the field last year because he was not as good as Javon Holland or Deshaun Elliott. The problem with Brandon Jones is how are you going to use him? Now, I don't know how Denver's going to use him. If they try and use him as a safety for coverage purposes, it's not going to work, and they're going to overpay by a mile. If they use him as more of a box safety, which I think he's better at, but Fangio doesn't employ, he's got a shot to be really solid. He's a great blitzer, very good blitzer off the edge. Made a ton of plays for Miami in that role. But if you're banking on his coverage ability, you're going to be just left wanting more and more and more because that's not what he's meant to do. It's not who he is. Great blitzer. I wouldn't have paid him like that. I figured he was gone, and I have made my peace with that. Now, after all of that, let's get into players added by the Miami Dolphins. We'll start at linebacker with Jordan Brooks. Got a 3-year, $26 million deal to come in and be starting middle linebacker and presumably a 3-4 defense alongside of David Long Jr. Love those two together. I think that'll be a really solid 1-2 linebacking core. So I'm excited to see him come in and play. Young still too. Ton of tackles. Surprised that Seattle let him get out of the building. They also signed center Aaron Brewer, 3-year, $21 million, who will be the starting center day one for Miami. They have not brought back Connor Williams, and even if they do, he will not be ready. Tore his ACL in late December. He's not going to be ready for some time. So they needed to get a center. Aaron Brewer is a very solid center who is a great athlete, very good in the run game, will thrive in a zone rushing scheme. That's what he's best at. Get up to the second level. A mean hitter, needs to work on pass protection, but I trust Butch Berry, our offensive line coach, to figure it out and help get him set to become a really solid starting center in the NFL. So I'm excited about that pickup for sure. And I thought that the Dolphins absolutely stole Kendall Fuller for a 2-year, $15 million contract. One of the best available defensive backs in free agency. I thought he was going to be getting like 14 a year for probably 2 or 3 years. Signs for 2 years, $15 million for Miami. I mean, that's such a sweetheart deal. And he is better talent-wise at this point in time than Xavier Howard is. And we're getting him for 2 years, less than 1 year of Xavier Howard. That's great business for Miami, in my opinion. Also brought in Jonnu Smith, 2-year, $8.4 million deal to be kind of an all-around tight end. Dolphins haven't really had a great pass-catching tight end in several years. Yeah, Mike Gesicki, but he was just a big wide receiver. Let's be honest. He's not a tight end. He's just bigger and slower, so we're like, oh yeah, put him at tight end. No, not a tight end. Can't block to save his life. Jonnu Smith can do a little bit of everything. He's nothing special. No one's going to have him in the top 5 tight end rankings, but I think he's solid and pretty cheap, so I'm okay with that. They also brought in Shaq Barrett, 1-year, $7 million deal, who will see a ton of. He's going to make his money in the first few weeks of the season with guys like Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb working back from injury. So I like bringing in a vet to kind of teach the rookie class, considering we drafted 2 defensive linemen, 2 edges. So I'm okay with that deal. I like that. 1-year, $7 million. Come in, do your thing, and see you later. And then last guy I want to talk about them bringing in, who I think there's too much fanfare has been made about. It's bringing in Odell Beckham Jr. on a 1-year, $3 million deal that can go up to, I think, about 7 or 8 with incentives. So if he hits those incentives, fantastic. That means he's earned that extra money. I don't see that happening because he's going to be in a dogfight for that number 3 receiver spot. It's Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and then it's going to be a battle between Braxton Berrios, Eric Ezukanma, Odell Beckham Jr., I think Malik Washington, a rookie pick we'll talk about in a bit here, has a shot to take that number 3 spot as well. So he's going to have to fight. But for a $3 million to be a vet present and just to compete for the number 3 spot, I like that a lot. Not a needle mover, but solid. So I will say it is tough to replace guys like Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt, but they're at positions that just aren't as valuable as they were paid. You don't see guards getting $20 million deals. You don't see defensive linemen who don't impact in the rush game, in the pass game. He does not get sacks. His best season was this past year, and of course in a contract year, alongside of a defensive line that included Bradley Chubb, who had double-digit sacks, Jalen Phillips, who was on pace for double-digit sacks, and Zach Sealer alongside of him, who absolutely ate up double teams and just paved the way for Christian Wilkins. He would constantly push his offensive linemen into Wilkins, free up Wilkins to make a move. So I want to say to be fair, again, I'm going to be fair as I can, I'd say it's a net even. They didn't spend the big money on the guys who aren't at positions of high value. You saved that money for really good edge rushers and weapons and quarterbacks. That's what you do. So we'll call free agency a wash as well. Let's talk draft. With pick number 21 in the NFL draft, the Dolphins took defensive end Chop Robinson out of Penn State. If you want to know my initial reaction, enjoy that video.
Or Johnny Newton. Not Chop Robinson or Xavier Worthy. Oh, stop it! No!
Yeah, I didn't like it at first. I'll be blunt. I did not like the pick at first, but when you've got Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips both battling back from season-ending injuries, you need guys. You need bodies in there. He's got unbelievable upside. He's probably got one of the highest ceilings in the class as a pass rusher. He's also got one of the lowest floors. He didn't have the production at Penn State. However, you can dig a lot deeper than that. Look at more advanced statistics. He was one of the college football's leaders in quarterback pressures, which means he was always right there. His teammate Adisa Isaac is going to make money in the NFL strictly because Chop Robinson constantly pushed him that way, and Adisa Isaac was able to clean it up. Watch the tape. It's very apparent that happens a ton. Chop Robinson's first step is unbelievably explosive. With good coaching, can be very, very good. If Weaver can get a hold of him and really coach him up, I like Chop Robinson. And eventually then we get out of Bradley Chubb's contract, we pay Jalen Phillips, and we go with Phillips and Robinson going forward. I'm okay with it. I think that they could have done better, but I'm okay with it. Second round, they took offensive tackle Patrick Paul out of Houston. Very similar. Guy with all of the size, all of the tools you could ever want to play offensive lineman, and he has a sick face mask. If you haven't seen it, Google Patrick Paul face mask, Miami Dolphins. It's awesome. He never gave up sacks at Houston. He won all the time with awful technique. Straight up awful technique. He was just bigger and more athletic, bigger, stronger, faster than every edge rusher he came up against. That won't work in the NFL, but Butch Berry took Austin Jackson, who was a bona fide bust, and turned him into a very solid starting right tackle in the NFL. So I trust him. I trust him to coach him up. And he's going to get to learn from Teron Armstead as well. Eventually, I think he's got starting left tackle upside. So in your first 2 rounds, you might have gotten starters at premium positions, edge rusher and at tackle. You can't hate that. It's relying on coaching. You've drafted guys with all the tools in the world. Now can the coaches get the most out of them? I like what Chris Grier did in the first 2 rounds of this draft. Then we talk about no picks in the 3rd round. And they didn't have a 4th round pick until they traded a future 3rd, considering they will get some picks back due to the compensatory formula. Traded a future 3rd and took running back Jalen Wright out of Tennessee. Just more speed. Dolphins are all in on the speed, man. I hope that works because they're all in on that 4.38 40, true bell cow kind of style running back, whereas Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert are more just straight speed. I do think Jalen Wright is a very good running back. I had him with a 3rd round grade in this draft class, so I was happy with the pick. Hate giving up a future 3rd. But at the same time, I don't mind it so much. Was kind of hoping they were trading up for an lineman, but whatever. So I like that pick. And then I also like, and you got to think last year as well, going back on the Jalen Wright pick. Last year we were trotting out, I can't even think of what his name was, 7th round pick or undrafted free agent running back. Why can't I think of his name? Kind of a bruising running back, but all of our running backs were hurt. Mostert hurt, Achane hurt. We were relying on Jeff Wilson, a little bit of Salvon Ahmed, who I never want to see play for the Dolphins again, and Chris Brooks, who's more of a fullback type guy. But we were just trotting him out there. We were out of running back. So that shouldn't happen again, considering we've got 4 or 5 guys now who can play. Dolphins also took Mo Kamara out of Colorado State. I thought that was a solid pick. Also, he's the exact opposite of Chop Robinson. He does not have all the physical tools in the world, but at Colorado State, he was very good. Racked up, I believe it was, 21 and a half sacks over the last 2 seasons, so he gets production. Hopefully, you just combine him and Chop Robinson, and you've got an amazing defensive end. So hopefully, whatever he knows, he can teach Chop, because Chop has the athletic ability to take that to a whole other level. So I like him. He could see a ton of reps. He also reminds me a lot of Shaq Barrett in their size and style of play. So who better to learn from than Shaq Barrett? So I like that pick. And then final guy I want to talk about is wide receiver Malik Washington. Dolphins took him in the 6th round out of Virginia. A lot of draft pundits, any draft website you look at, had him as more of a 3rd to 4th round guy. So I'm certain he slipped because of his size, about 5'9.5". So not the biggest receiver, but look at the stats at Virginia, man. Unbelievable. 110 receptions, led the nation in receptions. Over 1,400 yards and 9 touchdowns at Virginia. Real quick, tell me who Virginia's quarterback is. I'll wait because I couldn't tell you. So can you tell me? No? So he doesn't have a great quarterback throwing him the ball, and yet he is just getting passes, hauling in 110 in a season, a college football season? That's unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. I think that's a great pick. We might see him play a decent amount in the slot. He could be a starting slot receiver this season. So another guy that's just going to come in and compete for a job right away. Great backup options if any receivers go down injured. So when we talk about this draft, I went through a lot, so thank you for bearing with me here. I really think that it's a class that will require the context. I didn't love the Chop Robinson pick. I wanted Graham Barton. Desperately wanted Graham Barton or Jerzon Newton. However, when you don't have a defensive end because your 2 starting defensive ends are hurt, and then Van Ginkel's gone, and you cut Emmanuel Ogbah to save a ton of money, which was a great move, what do you have? You have nothing at the position. You have to have somebody with some upside and some future there. And I think Chop Robinson has a ton of upside in the future. Same thing goes for Patrick Paul. If Teron Armstead goes down, we're going to have to rely on Kendall Lamm to be the starting left tackle again all season. God forbid something happens to him. What do you have there for the future? What is your plan? You have to have a plan for the future. Tron Armstead nearly retired. Patrick Paul is the plan for the future. That's a pick that I don't see contributing a bunch this season. I hope he doesn't have to play except in the preseason or in garbage time of a game. So that's a guy where you're drafting more so for the future. Needs to be coached up. I trust Butch Berry to do it. I like Jalen Wright. I don't know if I would have given up a future third to get him. I already said that. But I do think that he'll show some flashes. I think he'll be on the field a good bit this year. Our top 3 running backs being Mostert, Achane, and him. Love that. Great. One of the best running back rooms in the NFL without a question. So I like that pick enough. And then they did get some pretty good value later on in the draft, like in the 5th and 6th rounds. I like those picks. So I like this draft. I don't love it. I like the draft. So I've got to be fair in grading these, even though I'm wearing the aqua and the orange. So I'm going to give this draft class a B- for their Dolphins class this year. A lot of upside, though. This could look like an A+ draft in a 3-4 years, which is what I'm praying for. So B- for their draft grade. Overall, this was an offseason that Dolphins and their fans, we've been mentally preparing for. I knew this was going to happen. You can't pay everybody as you pay other players like Bradley Chubb, Tyreek Hill, top money. Eventually, your guys that you have drafted and developed, they want to get paid, and they deserve to get paid. Wilkins and Hunt deserve every dollar that they get. They've earned it. I'm never going to sit here and be like, I'm not a bag watcher. Get your money. For NFL players, get your money. And I'm hoping that the Dolphins were smart in not overextending themselves now with an eye on this upcoming offseason. I think this 2025 offseason is going to tell me a lot about the Dolphins, and it may be time to start over. But they've got to extend Tua. They've got to. And I mean, they have to. If you're not going to sign back your 2019 class or your 2020 class minus Tua, then you absolutely have to bring back your 2021 class, which has netted you 3 starters so far. 4 if you want to count Eichenberg, who I do not want to count, but I will for the sake of this. So if you're not going to re-sign these guys, if you're going to let Hunt and Wilkins and Jones and Van Ginkel all go, you damn well better bring back Phillips, Waddle, and Javon Holland at the very least next offseason. I'm praying that that's what happens. So I like the talent they brought in, lost a lot of talent, and they still need a right guard. So I'm hoping with that June 1st money, they address that position. Who knows what they'll do with it. However, for their off-season moves, everything in totality, I'm giving them a C+. I'm not going to homer this one. It's a C+ offseason. You lost some really, really good players, and it's hard to replace really, really good players when you're on a budget. So that's all I've got for you guys in today's longer video, considering this is my team. I've got a lot to say about them. So I'll see you guys in tomorrow's episode where we talk about the Minnesota Vikings in the 32 NFL offseasons in 32 days.